There's a theory out there the Chiefs already have their wide receiver one for the 2023 season. Can that be real? We're going to tell you right now on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. It's Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform. Check out another Locked On show. Thanks for making us your first listen, but your second listen ought to be another Locked On platform show. I hope that you dig that. We're brought to you by FanDuel today. This episode and every one of ours is the official sportsbook sponsor of the NFL. Make every moment more with FanDuel.com/lockedon today and get started. Don't mind the voice because I am ill and clearly fumbling a little bit here, but we're going to get to this concept that is floating out there. A couple of things. There's a new coaching hire that's going to come into it. There's going to be free agents the Chiefs try to return in the second segment, but we're going to start right now this morning, today, off the top of the show with the concept of wide receiver one in Kansas City in 2023. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, home of the Athletic Matrix that will be out very, very soon for this draft class, as well as NFL33.com and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark. Thank you all for listening, and you can find me at Chiefs Corner. Lots to talk about when we start looking at wide receiver one and we start talking about Chiefs free agents. If you haven't already, please hit the like, subscribe, or notification bell on YouTube. When you start looking at wide receiver one, James Palmer came out and reported, I believe I guess it was on Tuesday, that Kansas City is expecting that their wide receiver group is going to remain about the same as what it was in 2022, which would obviously mean they bring back Juju. But he also did say and specify that Kansas City believes they have their wide receiver one in Toney.
In Kadarius, Toney, been with the team half of a season, but made an impact. Toney. Okay, I'm with you.
Yep.
Okay, that's the interesting thing. I love the fact that he just kind of slipped in the part about, hey, we're going to try to bring back Juju. And now this is all from Pelissario's point of view. This is what he's hearing, what he's able to report. This is
James
not
Palmer.
From the, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Jesse Palmer. Kudos to you. This is not from the mouth of one Andy Reid or Brett Veach, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But if the concept is put the band back together and run it back with Juju coming back, I can see that. The question just for me is, did we see enough out of Kadarius Toney to think that he can be the number one wide receiver in this offense, meaning he should get the most targets, he should produce the most yardage and the most touchdowns? Can you see that actually happening?
Can I see it happen? Yes. Do I expect it to really be the case that they think he's going to be their wide receiver one going forward? I don't think so. I think this is smoke, personally. That's the way I look at it.
For what reason and from who? Who benefits from the smoke?
I think Kansas City benefits because I think they're going to be looking at wide receiver in this class. I do think that they're going to try to add somebody. And you have to remember, Brett Veach has said that he wouldn't mind adding a wide receiver in the first 3 rounds every single season. Technically speaking, if you really think about it, they already have this year because they spent a 3rd-round pick in 2023 on Kadarius Toney. So they already have.
Yeah,
I understand. I'm just it's technically they have. So at this point, it's one of those things where I do think Toney can be a very good wide receiver for him. I don't think he's going to be their main wide receiver. He may end up being their main guy in 2023. I don't think that he's going to be their main guy for the next several years. I still think they're looking for another X-type or just another legitimate receiver that can step in and play and be a number one.
For me, a number one is a guy that draws coverage, that gets the majority, the lion's share of targets. And we know that on this particular roster and rosters for this team going forward, there's going to be a nice, well spread out target number, right? But the guy who's a number one has to carry the load for me. He has to make sure that he produces the most yards. And that's part of the offensive design as well as the performance of the player. But that's the thing that I don't see yet, that Kadarius can step into that role unless Juju doesn't come back. Because if you have MVS back, if you have Juju back, what is that? What does that allow you in terms of just area to breathe on the field that allows him to be the number one?
Well, and I would take it a step further, and I hate saying this because I hope that I'm wrong about this specific issue, but what makes you think that with his past over the past 2 seasons that he's going to be able to stay healthy enough to be a number one wide receiver? I I see this as smoke. I think that this is Kansas City saying we're happy with the guys we have, and I don't have a problem with that. I still expect them to add somebody.
I have to agree. This is when you say smoke. Kudos to Jesse Palmer for putting something out there that makes us all think. But I think this is more of a distraction than anything else. They will add another target. They do have to upgrade. I don't think they're going to sit on their laurels, like you said. The instinct for Brett Veach is to upgrade.
Yeah, the question I have though is we're talking wide receiver with Toney, and Kelsey was in this list of bringing it back as well. Is it possible Kansas City looks at the tight end position? With everything else being
3 picks?
It depends on who's gone. If they're not going to trade up, tight end might be a position that would be there that they could look at. I'm not saying that I expect them to do that, but look at how successful they were in 12 and 13 personnel last year. Mm-hmm. They could exploit a lot of things if they go out and they get somebody else that can step in and be half as productive as Travis Kelce.
That's very, very true. But I will say this, in looking at the draft class, the most athletic tight end in this draft class is going to be a 5th round pick. They're going to be guys that in a normal year would go in the 2nd and 3rd that are going to be down in the 5th and 6th and 7th rounds. So I think if any year, this is not the year to go do that in the top 100. But like you said, if that's the focus and they don't know about Jody Fortson, that becomes a conundrum. Now, Noah Gray's under contract. He's not going anywhere. So that's really the only slippage point I can see at the tight end spot. But there are plenty of other positions where you could see something coming or going. And the I won't say rebuild, but the retooling of this next version as we get into 2023. We'll talk about some of the other free agents the Chiefs have that might need to come back, might want to come back, and some that may not on the other side of this. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel because they are what you want right now because it's mid-NBA season. It's March Madness about to drop. Lots and lots of action going on that you can get in on. And all you got to do is make this the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and they have a great deal for you right now. It's a no-sweat first bet. You put a bet on for $5 and you lose, they'll give you $1,000 in free bets. Super, super easy. They're bonus bets. They go right into your account just if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. It's harder to say, but then you can get everything from money lines to three-pointers sunk to offensive rebounds, everything. You can roll that in and even get a same-game parlay, which makes your payout even bigger. So don't miss this chance right now. That no-sweat first bet is the real deal. If you make the $5 bet and lose, you get $1,000 in bonus bets into your account at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the NFL. The list is quite long of free agents in Kansas City.
It is.
And now, obviously, you're adding 2 more in Frank Clark and Orlando Brown. Just before everybody starts asking questions, I think given the flowery send-off and everything, we talked a little bit about that yesterday with Matt Derrick. If you missed that show, folks, go back and check on that one because we are 5 days a week, year-round. You want to check us out every day because we have something different for you. That was an interesting one. It made me feel like I don't think Frank Clark is even in the conversations here to come back at this point, though.
I could see that, but it also really depends. To me, it depends on what his market is and what they think that he's going to get out there. If they're right and his market isn't great, maybe he ends up back here because he wants to be here because the money is going to be about the same. But if he's able to get, if he's able to get $8 or $9 million, Kansas City can't do that. You can't. So you're in a scenario where if that's the case, then yeah, he's not going to be back. But I could see him being back under the right scenario of, $3 or $4 million a year with some incentives, and that might be something that would bring him back. I just don't know what his market's going to be. The question becomes, you look at the production last year, and while it wasn't great in the regular season, obviously he produced in the postseason. There's still questions about how productive he's going to be throughout this entire season, and he didn't play every single game last year. So that's going to be something to watch as well. Really quick, I just want to update, since we do have more information with the cap the way it is, Kansas City right now is just under $17 million in cap space. according to overthecap.com, and that includes, obviously not tagging Orlando Brown, and that includes Frank Clark being cut. Still waiting on some more information on EFRAs and RFAs, but we will get that. We will post that information when we know it.
Yeah, and that could be coming straight away. So let's go over who does have a chance to come back. We'll go chronologically. Chad Henne's already retired. Out the door. Kudos to him. Have a Coke and a smile. He's going to have a good retirement. Brandon Williams is 34 years old, as is Carlos Dunlap. Do you expect either of them to return?
Not unless it's on a vetman deal. If they want to come back on a vetman deal in Kansas City, and really, those types of deals are only going to be done after the draft happens.
Right.
They're not going to sign them before the draft. They will sign people after the draft to fill spots if they're not able to get what they want.
Agreed. I think there's a reasonable chance for either of them, to tell you the truth, depending on what they're able to get done on the defensive front in the draft. That's very
well, and that's the key right there is what are they able to get done?
Yeah.
If Veach does what he did with the corners with the defensive line this year, I don't think either of them are back.
That's true. If you make a significant run at it, you can shore that up pretty quickly. All right, so that takes us down to 32. That's Blake Bell. Aforementioned, like we talked last segment about the tight ends. I've been thinking that he probably doesn't make this roster for the last 2 years, and he keeps doing it. So I don't know why I'd bet against him now.
I don't think he's back. And I don't think he's back because he was inactive the last couple of games of the season, and Jody Fortson wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he's back. Maybe they bring him back on a deal where he can be there through training camp. I just can't imagine that he's going to play this year. If they like Fortson, if they bring Fortson back with the EFRA tag, I can't see Blake Bell back because I just don't think they're going to carry 4 tight ends on the roster all year long and have Bell be the guy that's inactive.
Okay, unless there's a rookie involved, right?
Right. If there's a rookie involved, then that's a different scenario.
Fair enough. That takes us to 31 years old. Now, this is where it starts to get really interesting because normally I would tell you the last position you want at plus 30 is running back, but I think both Jerick McKinnon and Mike Burton come back, to tell you the truth. Do you think I'm crazy?
I think Burton's back for sure. McKinnon is questionable to me, and the only reason he's questionable is because I don't think that they're going to sign him before they go into the draft, and if somebody else is willing to give him money after the season he had, I could understand why he wouldn't be back.
Okay.
I think he would probably want to come back, but I don't think they're going to sign him until after free agency is over and the draft is done, like they did last year.
Yeah. It's going to be a pre-camp kind of maneuver, I think, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it could be post-camp for all I care because clearly Jerick understands what he needs to do in this offense. He's there as a spark plug at times. I think he wore out a little bit down the stretch this last season. So any wear and tear you take off of him, meaning a lighter training camp, maybe he doesn't come in until they break camp and he only practices in Kansas City. That makes perfect sense to me as well.
The OTAs, all that.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it'll depend on do they pick up a running back in the draft as well, which I do fully expect them to do.
And what they do with Clyde. Clyde's a question too. Are they going to trade him? Are they going to release him?
Yeah,
that's.
I don't think it's a factor on whether Jerick's there or not, though. I think it's a use case that Andy's going to want what he wants, and it's clearly paid off with Jerick McKinnon. So I agree with you on Mike Burton. That takes us to the 30-year-olds. We already talked about Frank Clark. He's one of them. The next, and this creepily snuck up on me. Deion Bush is 30 years old.
That's surprising. That's really surprising to me. I'm kind of shocked by that, actually. I never would have guessed he was that old, but that also means that he came into the league older than most rookies. The one thing I will say about him, I think he played very well on special teams, and I do think that he's a potential add, but I do not think it's going to be somebody that they're going to add during free agency. I think, again, it's one of those scenarios where and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they bring him back. Zane Anderson left, didn't he? So, they have other safety spots open, and Deion Bush didn't make that much money last year. So it's possible they bring him back if he's willing to sign for a cheap contract. But again, he may not end up being on the roster depending on what happens in the draft. That's the question about it.
Then we get into the 29s and 28s, and this is where it starts to get interesting because these are guys coming up on their second contracts. It is Andrew Wiley at 29 years old. I fully expect for him to get a contract offer elsewhere that takes him out of Kansas City. Jody Fortson is 28 now. The clock is officially ticking on Jody Fortson. And Juan Thornhill is surprisingly 28 years old as well. Same thing with Wiley. I expect him to get a contract offer outside of Kansas City that he has to take.
Okay, well, the one thing I will say on Fortson, he is an EFRA. So if they want him, he's back for less than $1 million a year. I expect him back. When you start looking at, Juan Thornhill, I don't think there's any way he's back. I just don't think they're going to pay the safety that much money. I think they're going to be looking at trying to replace him in the draft, and maybe Brian Cook is one of your starters at safety next year. Then you start looking at your other guys. We already talked about Juan Thornhill. Andrew Wiley, I'm sorry. I think he's priced out, and I would almost consider going with a different tackle and paying a little bit more, because I think I would be more comfortable with that if there's somebody that they think could step in and would be an upgrade at right tackle.
Fair enough.
That's me.
Okay. On the backside, I want to go over the 27-year-old because I think it falls off a cliff after that. We're going to get to that, as well as a coaching change that is about to happen, or actually has happened at this point, as well as who could the Chiefs bring in for one more position of need right now in free agency. We'll do that right after this. All right, we left off at 27 years old. Now, there are a couple of guys that are younger. They're going to be mostly restricted rights free agents. So we're just going to go over the 27-year-olds because there's a slew of them. Tell me who stands out that you think could come back. Jordan Franks, Nick Allegretti, Tommy Townsend, Darius Harris, Colin Saunders, Justin Watson, Derek Nottie, Juju, or Orlando Brown. Anyone. All of them. What do you got?
That's where it gets very confusing and very interesting. Nottie came back on a really light contract last year. If he's willing to do that, maybe they want to go that direction again. I think that they wait until after the draft this time if they're planning on going that direction in the draft. That's a big question. They do seem to be interviewing a lot of DNs and D tackles in the draft with their top 30 picks or their top 30 interviews. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out. Justin Watson, maybe. Again, to me, it's one of those guys, if he wants to come back on a less contract, okay, he can come back. He's going to have to fight for a roster spot because you've already got the top four already figured out if MVS stays, which as of right now, he is here. So, and if he's here as of March 17th, he is staying here because that guarantees part of his contract. So Darius Harris is a restricted free agent. Maybe they tender him. Wouldn't be shocked if they let him go. Tommy Townsend, I don't think there's any way that they let him go.
Right.
I think he's back. He's restricted rights, but I also think that they're going to do. I said this the other day, a second round tender on him or something else, because I don't think they're willing to take the chance that somebody would give him a big contract that they couldn't match. Allegretti, he's earned money. Yeah. He's played well enough for Kansas City. He's earned money. I can't see him back here.
No. Welcome home to Chicago is my guess.
Well, and possibly my guess would be Chicago or something like that. But my guess is that you're looking at a guy like Darian Kennard stepping in, being that swing guard that can step in and be that interior guy for you.
Yeah, knock on wood.
As far as Juju's back, I think Juju has a good chance of coming back. Kansas City has the cap space. We kind of talked about that already. They could build in some incentives. The thing that you worry about with Juju is, can he stay healthy for 17 games? He's got to get that figured out. And is there anything that they can do in the offseason to make it to where he can stay healthy for the 17 games? Orlando Brown, I don't think he's back. Nope. I know people think that think that he's going to get he's going to find the market isn't there for him. I think some team's going to pay for him.
Maybe.
Joel Corey tweeted out something that he thinks he's going to get a contract that's going to be $23.5 million a year on average for 4 years. There's no way Kansas City does that.
No.
They weren't willing to do the franchise tag at 20, so there's no way they're going to go 23.5.
Agreed. Tershawn Wharton is 25. He is restricted rights. He'll be back. Shane Bichelle, same thing. He's exclusive rights, 25 years old. The only question remaining is the youngest free agent on here is Mecole Hardman. Do you think there's any way, despite the injury, you think he's gone?
I think he's gone.
Okay.
Wide receiver market is too volatile. I think somebody's going to look at his speed and they're going to fall in love and they're going to give him money that he probably doesn't deserve. But I think he's done well in Kansas City for what they've asked him to do for part of it. But I think that he also didn't develop like you would have hoped that he would have.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
So,
all right, let's switch gears then. That's the Chiefs free agents. Now, a lot of hubbub made today about free agents coming in to Kansas City. A couple in particular. One is a guy, unlike Travis Kelce, who I think is a better podcaster than me. Taylor Lewan is not. I'm just going to tell you, Taylor. I hope you come to town or whatever, but no, I got you. But the big question is, he's a man that's played 5 games in 2 seasons. He is 32 years old. He is got this injury history. He made some noise on social media, kind of outing at the Chiefs, trying to hint that he was interested in coming here. Do you think that's even a viable option for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Sure, if he wants to sign a 1-year deal for like $8 million with incentives, a playing time of 12 games or 13 games. I mean, I don't think that there's any way that they bring him in as the starter, and I think that I can't see Veach doing that, especially considering you're already in a situation kind of in that same line with your right tackle potentially in Lucas Niang, another guy that they know more about than we do. But Niang hasn't been able to stay healthy. So do you want to have both of your bookend tackles be guys that you have injury questions about? I don't think you'd want to be there.
No, that seems like a stretch. Now, other guys that are out there, Juwan James, he's 31. Cedric's been in Kansas City. Who else is out here? Cam Irving's been in Kansas City. He's 31. You get down to where you start to look at guys like
Donovan Smith just got cut.
He did just get cut.
He's 30.
Little injury history there. He's not on my list right now because he just got cut. I forgot about that. Going down the list, there isn't a whole lot there. A couple of other options. I know the Patriots fans aren't big on Isaiah Wynn. I don't know what went wrong, but he hasn't reached his potential in my opinion. So I think there could be upside there still. Caleb McGarry, I think you brought up before we started recording, from the Falcons. Does that ring true to you as an option?
Not for left tackle. I wonder if they would look at him at right tackle. Could he
he
be an
was a
upgrade
right
for
tackle.
what they had?
I wouldn't think left.
So could they look at him as an upgrade for next year? He's 28 years old, so he's a little bit older. So, but tackles usually play, 31, 32 years. So they could pay him. The argument that I've made, and I still feel this way, one of the reasons they didn't tag Brown is because, one, they want to try to get cheaper at the offensive line position, because next year you're looking at having to pay Creed Humphrey and maybe even Trey Smith.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are fighting me on the fact that they're not going to pay me early. I would bet money, hardcore money, that they absolutely pay Creed Humphrey next year.
Before it gets more expensive. I tend to agree. Let's see. Who else is on this list?
When you start looking at that, you want to try to get younger at the position. You want to try to get cheaper talent. That's why I think the offensive tackle is going to be something they're going to focus on in the draft.
I completely agree. There's a couple other guys on here that are a little bit younger, but they're already been and gone in Kansas City. Jared Christian, obviously Orlando. Folks are going to be screaming at me for not mentioning Prince Tega Wanago. He's like the only right tackle on here that we know can play right now. So I don't know that we know that about Lucas Niang. So maybe there's a chance that he does come back. I can't foresee him playing into serious snap consideration in the future.
He's an RFA though, so I mean it's cheap to bring him back. $2 million, a little over $2 million to bring him back. That's really cheap for an offensive lineman, so it wouldn't shock me. What about a guy like Juwan Taylor?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting to next. Greg Little, I don't think I'd be so interested in, but Juwan Taylor is probably the guy that makes the most sense if you're going to go like upside free agent at the offensive tackle spot.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big question as to what he's going to command. And that's really what it comes down to, is how much are you going to have tied up in your offensive line, because you still have Joe Toney until 2026. You have Creed for the next 2 years. You have Trey Smith for the next 2 years, but both of them are going to get a lot more expensive in the next couple of seasons. So if you can find a way to get cheaper and get great talent in the draft, I think that's where you want to focus. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I think when you start looking at what Kansas City is going to have to do, they're going to have to start deciding what premium positions are we going to try to draft almost every single year to try to keep the talent fresh and cheap. Because
Oh,
well, I don't disagree, but you can't take them all every single draft. You're not gonna have enough draft picks. But wide receiver, I think, is going to be one that they're going to try to take almost every single draft. Defensive end, I would expect to try to take it every single draft.
mm-hmm.
You could make an argument about defensive tackle if you can find somebody that give you pass rush interior, like Chris Jones does. That's not a premium position by most people's standards, but it can be based on pass rush in the defensive end vein. Left tackle obviously is going to be your big one. Can you find a guy that you want to go draft? Can you go spend your draft capital to move up and get a guy? There's guys out there. The Oklahoma tackle's 21 years old. He fits the measurements that people are. Anton Harrison. He fits the measurements that you'd want as a left tackle. Is that a direction you want to go? At 21 years old, you could have him easily for 10 years if he becomes what you would hope he would become.
Yeah, he's definitely up there on that list, behind Broderick and Paris, obviously, but definitely up on that list. We'll talk about the draft options for the tackles coming up, but
can you get that high to get Broderick or Paris? Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the conversation. Today is about free agents, folks. Tomorrow's going to be about free agents too. We'll be back and we'll talk about the defensive end free agents, both here and there, because I think that's the next interesting conversation. But first, there's a coaching change going on in Kansas City that was announced this afternoon. We thought this might be going this direction, but Greg Lewis will not be the wide receiver coach in Kansas City this year. I'm sorry, running back coach.
Running back coach.
He is going back to wide receiver. We knew when he got the interview with Eric Bieniemy's Washington Commanders, so we thought that this might be an option. Turns out he's actually going to another friend of Andy Reid, and is going to be coaching in Baltimore.
Yep. Kind of surprising he's willing to go back to wide receiver coach.
I wonder if that is a necessity of getting back to what you know best. But I got to tell you, this is a wide receiver room in complete disarray in an organization that is about to burn down the wide receiver room because Rashad Bateman has burnt his bridge with that organization. You call out the GM for blaming you for everything, that's a problem. This is going to be a very, very difficult situation for Greg Lewis to walk into.
Yeah, and that doesn't even talk about what they're doing with Lamar Jackson and how that's going to play out over the next couple of months.
Oh, ex-Baltimore Raven Lamar Jackson? Sorry, did I say that?
That's going to be a fascinating situation to watch.
I have to think that what this does for Greg Lewis is it allows him to step, again, kind of like Eric Bieniemy, outside of the Andy Reid tree and get back to what the position he knows best and really take on what will look to most league like a problem child room and see what he can do with it.
Yep. And if he's able to do something great with it, then maybe he gets an opportunity to go be an offensive coordinator somewhere else.
Exactly. One way or the other, there will be a new running backs coach in Kansas City. We don't know who that is yet, but we should have an idea here coming up. And when we do, we will definitely let you know and pick that apart as we do everything else. But thank you for spending your time with us today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about those defensive ends, a little bit more of free agency discussion. The frenzy's coming. We know that, folks. Thank you for spending your time today. Like, sub, and hit the bell on YouTube. Get subbed on the audio platforms. Check out another Locked On show for your next listen. The Locked On NFL Draft Show is in full swing with our new hosts, Keith and Damien. You want to check them out. They took over from me and Croc, and they're doing a great job, so make sure you check them out on their feed as well. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.